Hello heroes, I'm Kato and welcome to the ultimate magic guide for the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion and Oblivion Remastered. Have you ever wanted to stop foes in their tracks with a single frost spell? What about automating soul trapping? What about charming merchants so that you can completely ignore the persuasion minigame while getting some major discounts? Maybe you just want to make some simple Magicka Recovery potions. Or perhaps you're looking for the difference between damage, absorb, and drain. My original goal of a spellmaking guide quickly snowballed into this monstrosity you see before you. So now, this ultimate guide is hopefully a one-stop shop if you need to know what each of the magic schools in Oblivion do, spell effects from passives, build suggestions, way to make gold to spend on more spells, Magicka Recovery methods, how to level magic skills quickly, spellmaking, enchanting, and plenty of other handy tips along the way. I am thorough, but not perfect by any means. So if you have any questions after looking through this guide, please leave a comment. This is meant to be evergreen, so myself as well as other Oblivion players might be able to help. If you are a longtime fan of Oblivion and here for a refresher, feel free to share your knowledge of spellmaking and enchanting recipes. If your dream is to become a master caster in Cyrodiil and beyond, let's get to it. There's some updates with the remastered version which changed quite a few things related to magic in Oblivion, so I'd like to cover that really quick before we dig into the spells. Firstly, spell casting speed is still the quickest with touch spells. However, holding block while casting no longer works. Thankfully, there's a couple other ways to cast as quickly, and that's with either a bow out or a torch when your weapon is sheathed. Either one will maximize your casting speed with touch and projectile spells, which is especially useful if you want to level those skills quickly. Speaking of leveling, the experience gain for all magic skills has changed since Classic Oblivion 2. Now instead of gaining a sliver of experience per cast, in Oblivion Remastered, experience is based on Magicka cost. In other words, bigger Magicka cost, bigger experience gain. Those are the more pertinent changes to magic specifically, and I'll be sharing more about leveling later. I also want to put a quick note on how to find mages guilds here too, because this guide is packed to the guilds already and I couldn't really find another spot. The mages guild halls are in each town outside of the Imperial City, often marked with blue banners or signage and a circular stained glass window. Once you've joined up at one of the guild halls, you get a book, the guild charter, that shows you where the rest are and their magic specialties. The Skingrad guild hall, for example, is where you want to go for destruction spells. Since the guild is the best place to go for spells anyway, I'll be avoiding the variety spell merchants like Edgar's Discount Spells, because if you want a specific school of magic, it's best to go to the biggest source of those spells. Remaster and guild info is out of the way. Now, I think it's good to know what our magical toy box contains, so let's dive into the 6 different magic schools, what kind of spells they have, and where you can find more of them. First up is Alteration, which is how you affect or are affected by things in the physical world. This includes water breathing, which of course allows you to breathe underwater, and Argonians come with this innately. Alteration also includes water walking, which is largely self-explanatory. You can walk on water. But the interesting part is what the game considers a watery surface, because lava in the realm of Oblivion also counts. And water walking lets you stay above the surface while active. Just keep in mind the lava will still deal damage to you, but you'll be able to traverse it a lot more quickly. Alteration also includes the various shield spells. You have your basic shield, which gives you a flat armor boost, depending on its magnitude. Then you have the fire, frost, and shock shields, which are all better versions of the standard shield spell, giving you both resistance to that element as a percentage on top of that flat armor bonus. So if you have a 15% fire shield, you'll be 15% resistant to fire and have plus 15 armor. This school of magic also includes burden and feather. Burden will of course weigh down your target as if they are encumbered by heavy objects, and feather increases its target's carry capacity, which also means the lighter your load, the faster you'll move. Lastly, an alteration is the open spell, which will open locked doors and containers, the rank of lock depending on the magnitude of the spell, which makes this one of the 2 ways to completely bypass the lock-picking minigame that Oblivion has. If you choose Alteration as a major skill at the beginning of the game, you will also start with the spells Open Very Easy Lock and Protect, which is a self-cast shield spell. And if you want more Alteration spells to choose from, the Cheydinhal Mages Guild is where you will find the bulk of the Alteration spells for sale. If you do the recommendation quest while you are there, you'll be given the Buoyancy spell, which gives you water breathing and feather. The next magic school is Conjuration, which is pretty cut and dry. This is the magic skill that allows you to summon things. The main spell being Summon Creature that will include a variety of undead and daedra. This includes weaker minions like skeletons, ghosts, and scamps, up to much stronger summons such as Storm Atronox, Liches, and Zivili. These will fight at your side until the effect expires or until they are killed. Skills can also be trained on summoned creatures, and they're also able to be soul trapped. Something else Conjuration can do is summon bound items. This lets you summon weightless daedric equipment that replaces your current equipment temporarily, raising your defenses if it's armor, and or equipping you with a strong weightless daedric weapon until they expire. There was a substantial change that happened here with the summon bound item spell in the Oblivion Remaster, and that is that you can no longer sheath a conjured weapon to make it disappear. You have to either wait out the duration or use a dispel effect. This change does allow you to move around faster as you still have increased movement speed when your weapon is sheathed. You don't have to resummon it every single time if you get into a fight, which I find to be a nice convenience, just not so much for leveling purposes. The third kind of spell you can find in Conjuration is Turn Undead, which, when it meets or exceeds the target's level and they're undead, it causes them to flee, or sometimes just stand in place at a safe distance, allowing you to pelt them with ranged spells. Later in Skyrim, this became a restoration-based spell, but don't be fooled, Turn Undead in the realm of Cyrodiil is a Conjuration spell. If you choose Conjuration as one of your major skills, you will be starting with the Summon Skeleton and Turn Undead spells. And if you're looking for Conjuration-based spell merchants, the Coral Mages Guild is where you'll find the majority of what you would want. And hilariously, chapel priests at just about any town will be able to sell you the Turn Undead spell. Illusion is very much the mind magic school, or maybe we should just call it the shenanigan spell school, because most of these spells are non-aggressive actions, influencing those around you. One such way is with the charm effect, which increases disposition towards the player temporarily, and is a way to bypass the persuasion minigame. Command is the effect that converts an enemy to your side for the spell's duration, the magnitude determining the level of enemy you can cast it on. Illusion also includes the invisibility effect, which makes its target completely undetectable when cast, but is broken by any physical action, like opening containers or attacking. Chameleon, on the other hand, is like a pseudo-invisibility, which gives you a percentage of concealment, lowering your detectability but also allowing you to interact with objects around the world and not breaking the effect. 100% Chameleon is one of the easiest ways to remove all challenge from the game entirely. Illusion also includes the light spell, which is very self-explanatory. The target emits light for the spell's duration. Along with light, another alternative for seeing in the dark is Night Eye, which if you're playing as a Khajiit or develop vampirism, you get this by default. But Night Eye allows you to see better in the dark as well as underwater, but can also be pretty blinding in the daylight. Paralyze, one of the strongest spells in the game, is also under Illusion, and causes your target to freeze up completely, making them defenseless for the duration of the spell. Silence is a fairly self-explanatory one with a bit of nuance. On the surface, silence just prevents the target from casting the spells that they know. It does not, however, prevent them from using stabs, scrolls, or powers, and some enemies like to use poisons and powers that can be confused with spells pretty regularly. Next in Illusion are two sides of the same coin, Calm and Frenzy. The Calm spell decreases your target's aggression to the point of the target even becoming passive for the duration, which can be dispelled early if the target takes damage, where Frenzy increases the target's aggression, and this can cause the target to attack anyone near them, including their allies. Another two illusion effects that are two sides is Demoralize and Rally. Demoralize is basically just the creature or humanoid version of Turn Undead, causing the target to run away for the duration of the spell, and Rally is the opposite of that. It causes the target to be more brave even in the face of death. So if a target normally has a moment where they tend to flee, Rally prevents them from doing that. If you choose Illusion as a major skill at the beginning of the game, you gain Soothing Touch, which is an on-touch calm spell, as well as Starlight, which is a self-cast light spell. If you're searching for illusion specialists, you need not look any further than Breville, and the Mages Guild in this shantytown can provide you with all of the illusion magic that you'll probably need. And you'll also gain Captivate, which is a charm spell, just by doing the recommendation quest there. Next is the School of Destruction. If it does damage permanently or temporarily to your target, it's likely a destruction-based spell, but it also can empower your damage as well. Being it is about damage, the damage effect is under destruction. This is not elemental damage. This instead includes damage directly to vitals or certain stats. For example, damage magicka, damage fatigue, and damage health can be found under the damage spell umbrella, and affects the current values of these vitals. So when a character is affected by damage health, it's direct health damage, which can be recovered by normal means like healing potions or spells. But you don't have to worry about elemental resistances, just straight magic resistance. Burning an enemy's magicka pool with the damage magicka effect will reduce their spellcasting abilities, but of course magicka can be recovered over time based on willpower. And damage fatigue, being the most fun of these three in my opinion, deals damage to your enemy's current fatigue. If your enemy is someone wielding a two-hander and is doing a lot of power attacks, that moment when their health bar flashes tells you that their fatigue has reached the bottom. And any further damage to fatigue with, say, a damage fatigue spell will cause them to ragdoll to the floor for a short time. Now for the elemental damage spells, which you're likely familiar with because we all get the flare spell when we start the game. Fire is largely effective against undead, as well as plant-based enemies like Spriggans, but not as effective against most Daedra. Dark Elves are also strongly resistant to fire damage. Shock is the fastest traveling of the elemental projectiles, and most effective against Daedra, and less effective against Spriggans and Storm Atronox. Frost damage is an interesting one because altering its area of effect also changes the size of the projectile itself. And Frost, of course, is effective against fire-based enemies as well as Spider Daedra, with Nords being strongly resistant to it. Destruction also includes the Drain spell effect, which is different from the damage and absorb effects, and the main difference is that this is a temporary reduction to your enemy's stats rather than fully damaging them. With this spell type, you can drain skills, attributes, and vitals of your enemy, and an example of a strong usage of this spell type is by draining your enemy's strength and or speed, which can cause them to completely stop in their tracks while the effect is going on. Now let's move on to the weakness effect, which just makes all your other spells stronger. Weakness includes weakness to fire, frost, shock, weakness to poison, weakness to physical, and weakness to disease. Weakness to magic is a fun outlier because it amplifies almost any magical effect that you follow up with. On your target though, not on yourself. You can also just stack it with elemental weaknesses and it'll amplify that too. Lastly, under destruction we have disintegrate, and this damages the durability of your target's armor and weapons. However, durability got a substantial change in the remastered version. In old Oblivion, when you hit 0 durability, weapons would be completely unusable and armor would provide no protection until being repaired. So if you were able to damage the durability fully of an enemy, that would severely inhibit their ability to fight, because you break their weapon, they have no weapon. But now in the remaster, weapons and armor, when they are broken, retain a small level of their effectiveness, making Disintegrate a little less potent but still useful, especially if you want to create a repair loop for yourself. If Destruction is chosen as a major skill during character creation, you are given both Shocking Touch and Cold Touch. Combined with Flare, which we all start with, this gives you the full range of elemental magical effects right at the start. If you are searching for more destructive spells to spend your gold on, you may want to have a look at the Skingrad Mages Guild. If you do the recommendation quest there as well, Adrienne Barine can teach you the Weak Fireball spell, if you speak to her before heading out on her task. Now for the outlier of the magic schools, Mysticism. which is hard to describe, so I'll just describe it how the game does. The art of manipulating forces to bypass the limitations of the physical world. Maybe the term meta magic fits here too. Starting off strong, Mysticism has the Dispel effect. And if you multiply your Dispel effect's magnitude times 5, spells of that Magicka cost cast on you or a target will be dispelled. Dispel does not remove poison or disease, however, and this is more for removing defensive magics on enemies. For training purposes, you can also use it to dispel bound items. Detect Life is also under Mysticism, and when cast it reveals any creatures as a glow within the spell's range, even if they're behind walls. If you've become a vampire, this is part of the Hunter's Sight ability. The School of Mysticism also includes Soul Trap, which lets you trap an enemy's soul inside of a soul gem if they are killed while the effect is active. If you are familiar with how soul trapping works in Skyrim, it works almost identically here, except that it also is used in converting grand soul gems into black soul gems, and the Mages Guild quests actually go into the minutiae of that. And if you're completely new to the concept, filled soul gems are used in enchanting and recharging magical items. Mysticism also includes the Telekinesis spell, which allows the caster to manipulate objects from a distance. This is of course limited to the freestanding items in the game, and the attack and block buttons can be used to move it towards or away from yourself. The object in control can be dropped or thrown also, but unfortunately, throwing an object in this way doesn't seem to do any damage. Apparently in the Oblivion remaster, you can also use telekinesis on corpses now, with varying degrees of success depending on the size of the corpse you're dealing with. Maybe now you can shove bodies in open doorways even easier. Mysticism also includes the powerful Spell Absorption effect, which is the same effect that the Atronach Birthsign has. The magnitude of the spell absorption giving that percentage chance of you just absorbing a spell when it's cast at you and converting it into magicka based on the strength of the spell absorbed. Reflect, on the other hand, is the ability to just reflect physical or magical effects back at the attacker. The magnitude again determining the percentage chance, and also Reflect takes priority over other defensive effects. So if Reflect happens to go off first, your Absorb won't even have a chance to go off if you have that too. Just something to keep in mind. And also a hilarious feature that made it into the remaster is Reflect can also affect Temple Blessings. Finally, one spell that was added in the remastered version of Oblivion is the Clairvoyance spell, which everyone will start with now, and when cast it will direct you towards your objective as a glowing path. And Clairvoyance is a great spell effect for leaving the more repetitive and windy dungeons of Oblivion. If you finish up the tutorial and character creation with Mysticism as a major skill, this will start you out with Minor Dispel and Minor Life Detection. And if you are seeking out more Mysticism spells, the Leowin Mages Guild is where you can find just about every Mysticism spell for sale. If you are only looking for Soul Trap though, you can find that at every Mages Guild. Not only is Restoration perfectly valid in Oblivion, I'd argue that it's the most versatile and important. It cures, it heals, it soothes. It also allows you to rocket across the map if you stack its effects. So let's get into those, shall we? We'll start with Absorb, which shouldn't be confused with Spell Absorption, which is a defensive spell. Absorb is an offensive spell, which we're also going to separate into two subcategories. The first is Absorb Vitals, or Health, Magicka, or Fatigue on touch. When you slap your target with this spell, you will damage their health, magicka, or fatigue while recovering that same vital on yourself. In essence, stealing their essence. The other subcategory of Absorb is Absorb Skill and Absorb Attribute. These ones magically borrow skills and attributes when cast on touch, and then return to normal once the spell's duration ends. So again, if it's Absorb Health, Magicka, or Fatigue, you are stealing that stat, but if it's Absorb Attribute or Skill, you are borrowing that stat for the duration. The School of Restoration also includes the Cure effect, which is to say curing disease, poison, and paralysis. There are consumables that can fill this role, but once you do hit a high enough level of Restoration, Cure Disease is incredibly helpful. Cure Poison is obviously useful for humanoid enemies that tend to use a lot of poisons, like goblins, and bandits. Unfortunately, when it comes to Cure Paralysis though, this would only work when cast on a target, because if you're paralyzed, you can't cast spells on yourself. Maybe there's a secret application here, I'm just not aware of it. Thanks to Heal Minor Wounds that we all get at the beginning of the game, you're likely familiar with the Restore effect, at least when it comes to health. But the Restore effect can also affect fatigue as well as skills and attributes that have been damaged from diseases or poisons or something of that kind. So if you ever get hit by a diseased creature and it says your intelligence has been damaged, for example, Restore Intelligence will recover those lost intelligence points without having to go to a temple altar. Fortify is also under Restoration and is the ideal way to break your character's stat limitations. Fortify Health, Fortify Magicka, and Fortify Fatigue are all separate spell effects, while Fortify Attribute and Fortify Skill are umbrella effects. So if you get access to Fortify Willpower, for example, that will give you access to Fortify any attribute. Same with Fortify Skill, once you open it up at a spellmaking or enchanting altar. Any of these Fortify effects improve the maximum of whatever stat you're altering for the duration of the spell. And since so many things can be fortified, these effects can also be combined to massively boost a particular stat. Like if you fortify Intelligence and Magicka, both of these effects will boost your maximum Magicka for the spell's duration. If you're more of a set it and forget it kind of person, using Fortify effects as enchantments can become pretty powerful too. And the most powerful ones you can get will be from Transcendent Sigil Stones. Skills, on the other hand, for most of them, they don't really do anything past 100 except for athletics and acrobatics. So I suppose that's good to keep in mind. Finally, the last of the restoration spell effects is Resist. This effect includes anything that can be resisted in the game, which is to say diseases, poison, paralysis, and magical and physical damage. Many of the playable races start with a resistance of some kind, Nords with their resistance to frost, Dark Elves with the resistance to fire, and Breton and Orc with their powerful resistances to magic. There will also be opportunities to enchant these effects onto equipment, either via sigil stones or with your own soul gems at an enchanting altar. If you decide to create your character with Restoration as a major skill, you will be starting the game with Absorb Health, on top of our default Heal Minor Wounds. And if you are searching for restoration spells to fill out your collection, the Anvil Mages Guild can be your first stop, but the cure spells come specifically from Chapel Priests. And since Anvil's Chapel has often seen better days, going to just about any other town with a priest that is alive will get you access to those cure spells too. Just before we move on to playable races, here's a quick display of all the spells that are unlocked by choosing each of these schools as major skills. And if you ever need a refresher on which Mages Guilds sell which spells, you can find that out through the Mages Guild charter that you are handed when you join the Mages Guild, or in the help menu at the top of each Magic School entry. When you create your character in Oblivion, you have a lot of choices, many of which can be sorcery adjacent, and can give you a lot of spells to play with as soon as you leave the sewers. Now, if you are in it for the aesthetics and creating your own story, know that any of the playable races are viable for being a mage. Some will just take a little bit longer to build up the stats and skills necessary. And if power is your only motivation, it'll become pretty clear pretty quickly which races are the most gifted in magic. Speaking of, when you are choosing the race of your character, this will determine starting stat and skill bonuses, which you'll be able to see by selecting Show Details when it shows at the bottom of the screen in character creation. Intelligence and willpower are important, as well as their racial abilities. And these racial abilities are key to why I'm bringing the playable races up in the first place, because the passives and greater powers that you start with are also spell effects that you technically know right at the start, which means they are immediately usable as soon as you find a spellmaking or enchanting altar. First, I'll start with the default spell effects, because everybody gets these at the very start of the game, which means you'll also have two of these available as soon as you gain access to a spellmaking or enchanting altar. These spells are Heal Minor Wounds, which is under Restoration, Flare, which is your first destruction fire-based spell, and newly in the remaster, Clairvoyance, which is under Mysticism and creates a path of light when cast to your next objective. That's the default effects out of the way. Now, let's see how many more spell effects we can get with a fresh character. We're starting with A for Argonian, which starts with a 50 in intelligence if you choose the Thornmarsh origin, with a 15-point bonus to athletics and security, and a 10-point bonus to blade, hand-to-hand, alchemy, illusion, and mysticism. As for their passives and powers, they have a natural resist disease by 75% and complete immunity to poison, which does translate to resist poison 100%. And last but not least, Argonians have innate passive water breathing that is just constant instead of needing to be activated or cast when you want to use it. This means that all three of these effects, resist disease, resist poison, and water breathing, will all show up at spellcraft altars, but won't really be necessary to increase any further anyway. Next up is the Breton, and the origins kind of give you a choice between more strength-focused or speed-focused, while giving a starting count of 50 to both intelligence and willpower, which are our main attributes as a mage. They also get a strong start with magic skills with a 15-point bonus to Conjuration, Mysticism, and Restoration, with 10-point bonuses to Alchemy, Alteration, and Illusion. And the spell effects you'll get from the start by choosing a Breton are Breton Enhanced Magicka, which is a passive bonus of 50 Magicka, Breton Resistance to Magic, which is resist magic 50%, and the Dragon Skin Greater Power, which gives you a shield of 50% for 60 seconds on self once a day. Powerful as a Breton already is, all three of these effects, Fortify Magicka, Resist Magic, and Shield, can all be improved further via spell making and enchanting. Choosing the Hardy Dark Elf as your starting character is a lovely little nuanced choice, and either origin you choose is, well, up to choice because there is no intelligence or willpower bonus. In fact, there's a willpower penalty to both origins, which will have you start at 30 willpower regardless, with the 50 bonus going to speed. But Dark Elves do have other advantages. Dark Elves also start with a plus 15 bonus to Blade and Destruction, and a plus 10 bonus to Athletics, Blunt, Mysticism, Light Armor, and Marksman. The advantages don't stop there though. They also have Dark Elf Fire Resistance, which results in Resist Fire 75% as a passive. And just in case 75% is not enough, that Resist Fire effect can be used in enchantments and spell making. However, the other power that a Dunmer starts with, Summon Ancestor Guardian, is not available to be used in a spell making altar or enchantments. Well, it's a summon, so you can't enchant something with a summon, even though that would be kind of awesome. But even though that's not possible, this is the only race you can start as that can summon something out of the box. And it takes the form of a ghost that is leveled based on game difficulty and your own level, and can make a good 60-second training dummy, which we'll get into later. Next up are the magically attuned High Elves, so attuned in fact that they're glass cannons at the start. If you choose an Altmer as your starting race, your starting attribute bonus for intelligence will be 50. The origins only having influence on speed and endurance, and which one you'd rather have at 40. For the skill bonuses, High Elves get plus 15 to Alteration, Destruction, and Mysticism, and a plus 10 to Alchemy, Conjuration, and Illusion. The abilities that the Altmer come with are High Elf Enhanced Magicka, which fortifies Magicka by 100 as a passive effect, High Elf Disease Resistance, which is resist disease by 75%, and finally, the reason I call them a glass cannon is their High Elf Elemental Weakness, which gives them weakness to fire, frost, and shock by 25% also as a constant effect. But what this means on the spellcraft side of things is you will get Fortify Magicka, Resist Disease, and the Weakness to Fire, Weakness to Frost, and Weakness to Shock effects all available as soon as you find those altars, which turns the High Elf weakness into a way of amplifying your damage further. Next is the local race, known as the Imperial. If choosing the Calovia origin, they'll start with a 40 in willpower with a 30 in speed, while the Nibene origin will have a 30 in willpower and 40 to speed. Both origins will start with a below average agility of 30 and an above average personality of 50. As for skill bonuses, no magic-based ones here, but Imperials get a 15-point boost to Heavy Armor, Mercantile, and Speechcraft, and plus 10 to Blade, Blunt, and Hand-to-Hand. As for the Imperials' abilities, they get Star of the West, which is a greater power that casts Absorb Fatigue 100 on touch once per day, and Voice of the Emperor, which charms 30 points for 30 seconds on target once per day. This, of course, makes Absorb Fatigue and Charm available for spellcrafting as soon as as the player finds the spell-making altars. Next up is the second beast race, known as the Khajiit, with the origins mainly coming down to whether you want a penalty to strength or endurance. And regardless of which origin you choose, they'll both get a below average willpower of 30. But they both also come with an above average agility of 50. For skill bonuses, the Khajiit gets plus 15 to hand-to-hand and acrobatics, and plus 10 to athletics, blade, light armor, security, and sneak. The racial abilities of the Khajiit are Eye of Fear, which is a greater power that demoralizes up to level 25, in other words uncapped, for 30 seconds on target once per day. Khajiit also have the lesser power known as Eye of Night, which lets you cast Night Eye as much as you want for 30 seconds on self at a time. And of course, both of these illusion-based effects become available at a spellmaking and enchanting altar. Next are the Nords from the North. All Nords start with a below average intelligence and personality of 30, but if you choose the Western origin, you'll get a below average willpower of 30, but a massive starting endurance of 50. If you choose the Eastern origin, it's more balanced instead, with just average willpower and endurance of 40. As for skills, the Nords get a plus 15 to blade, blunt, and heavy armor, with a plus 10 to armorer, block, and restoration. And when it comes to abilities, Nords get Nordic Frost, which is a frost damage greater power of 50 points on touch once per day, Woad, which is another greater power that grants shield 30% for 60 seconds on self once per day, and the passive Nord Frost immunity, which even though it says immunity, it's actually resist frost 50%. Still, nothing to scoff at. Bringing a Nord straight from jail to a spell-making altar, thanks to the abilities they start with, will give you access to a frost damage spell effect, a shield spell effect, and the resist frost effect, just by choosing a Nord. The next playable race to go over is the Formidable Orc, which has some very different attribute bonuses because they're done in a lot of increments of 5 instead of 10. Regardless of origin, an Orc starts with a above average strength of 45 and above average endurance of 50, with a below average agility of 35 and below average speed of 30. If you choose the Stronghold origin, you'll get an above average willpower of 50 with a below average intelligence and personality of 30, while choosing Orsinium leaves intelligence at an average of 40, above average willpower of 45, and a further below average personality of 25. Again, weird attribute layouts. For skill bonuses, the Orsimers start with 15 armor, block, and heavy armor, and plus 10 to hand-to-hand. Even though they have a below average amount of skill bonuses, the abilities Orcs come with is where they show their true strength. The once-a-day greater power known as Berserk fortifies fatigue by 200, fortifies health by 20, fortifies strength by 50, and drains agility by 100 on self for 60 seconds. And they also get a passive in the form of Orc Magic Resistance, which is resist magic 25%, which is a constant passive effect. So all of this means that when you get into spellcrafting, an Orc may actually have more spell effects than most other races, because they'll have Fortify Fatigue, Fortify Health, Fortify Attribute, Drain Attribute, and Magic Resistance as soon as they can access spellcraft altars. Ninth of the playable races to go over is the Red Guard, which, unfortunately, regardless of origin, have a below average intelligence and willpower, but an above average endurance. So choosing Dragontail Mountains as the origin will give an above average strength of 50, but a below average personality of 30, and the Alakir Desert origin will just average out strength and personality at 40. Starting skill bonuses for the Red Guard include 15 to Athletics, Blade, and Blunt, and 10 to Heavy Armor, Light Armor, and Mercantile. The Red Guard's main power is called Adrenaline Rush, which is a greater power that fortifies agility, endurance, speed, and strength by 50, and fortifies health by 25 for 60 seconds on self once per day. Red Guards also come with two passives in the form of Red Guard Disease Resistance, which is resist disease by 75% constantly, and Red Guard Poison Resistance, which is the same thing, but for poison. So if you're sprinkling at least a little bit of magic into your Red Guard's build and find yourself crafting spells, Adrenaline Rush gives access to Fortify Attribute and Fortify Health, as well as Resist Disease and Resist Poison, which are, less needed because of the 75% resistance already. Last of the playable races to go over is the Wood Elf, which probably have the most straightforward attribute bonuses and penalties, with an above average agility and speed of 50 regardless of origin, but also below average strength and willpower of 30 regardless of origin. The Grotwood and Reaper's March origins mainly just decide on whether endurance or personality is going to be average, while the other will be at 30. As for skills that the Wood Elves are proficient in, they get 15 in Alchemy, Marksman, and Sneak, and 10 in Alteration, Acrobatics, and Light Armor. When it comes to powers, the Wood Elf has Beast Tongue, which allows them to command creature up to level 5 for 60 seconds on target once per day. And they also come with Wood Elf Disease Resistance, which is resist disease 75%, which is certainly not an exclusive effect. So at the Spellcraft altars, you'll get access to command creature and resist disease once they're available to you as a Wood Elf. Now that we've gone over the playable races, there's one more character creation related thing to go over, and that is birth sign effects. Like racial abilities, birth signs also translate over to basically crafting materials for your spellmaking and enchanting. Some of these birth signs grant passive effects, while others grant you more once-a-day greater powers. So I'll quickly go over what each of these birth signs do, but also what they give you pertaining to spellcrafting. Starting at the top of the birth sign choices you get during the tutorial is the Warrior. This will passively fortify your character's endurance and strength by 10, which translates to a fortify attribute effect when you open up a spellmaking altar. Next is the Mage birth sign, which when chosen gives a passive fortify Magicka by 50 points, and makes that same effect, fortify Magicka, available at spellmaking altars. Choosing the Thief birth sign will fortify agility, luck, and speed by 10, and like the Warrior, this gives access to fortify attribute for crafting purposes. Next birth sign is the Steed's birth sign, which fortifies your character's speed passively by 20 points, and just like the Warrior and Thief, unlocks the fortify attribute spell effect. Next is the Apprentice birth sign, which is the Mage, but more painful. It gives a passive fortify Magicka by 100 points, but also gives you a weakness to magic by 100%. At spellmaking and enchanting altars though, this makes both fortify Magicka and weakness to magic already available. Next is the Shadow birth sign, first in the list that offers a greater power, called Moon Shadow, which lets you cast invisibility 60 seconds on self once per day. So not only do you have an immediately usable invisibility spell, but you can also start making your own once you are able. The Ritual birth sign gives you two powers. One lesser power called Blessed Word, which is a turn undead spell up to level 25 for 30 seconds on target, and can be cast as many times as you want at the cost of 40 Magicka, and also the Mara's Gift greater power, which restores health 200 on self once per day. This is one of the strongest variants of the Turn Undead spell, so I would suggest that as the incentive for choosing the ritual. Next birth sign is the Atronach. Well known by min-maxers, this gives a passive Fortify Magicka 150 points on self, and Spell Absorption 50% on self, but also gives you the Stunted Magicka effect, which prevents any natural Magicka regeneration, meaning you'll have to recover it in other ways like absorbing spells, or drinking potions, or using Ayleid Wells. So big benefit, big trade-off. And if you do choose the Atronach birth sign, Fortify Magicka of course becomes available for spell customization as well as the Spell Absorption effect, which will let you up your spell absorb even further if that's your primary means of getting Magicka back. The next birth sign is the Tower, which will grant you two greater powers if it's chosen. The Tower Key greater power, which lets you open average lock on target once per day, and the Tower Warden greater power, which grants reflect damage 5% for 120 seconds on self once per day. This makes open and reflect damage both available at spellmaking altars, and apparently the Tower birth sign is the only way to have the reflect damage effect available at a spellmaking altar before getting to the Shivering Isles. The Lord is the birth sign that got changed in Oblivion Remastered, so I'll read off the old Oblivion description and give you the new one as well. In the original, you would get Blood of the North, a lesser power, which restores health 6 points for 15 seconds, 90 points points total on self multiple times a day at the cost of 50 magicka, but would also give the passive penalty called Trollkin, a permanent weakness to fire, by 25%. As for how the Lord Birthsign improved, now it is 2 passives in the form of Shield 15 and plus 15% magic resistance, something I like to call the Pocket Breton. So going to a spellmaking and enchanting altar after choosing the Lord will make both shield and magic resistance available as effects you can use. The Lady Birthsign is pure and simple. It gives a Fortify willpower and endurance by 10 points on self. And just like the Warrior, Thief, and Steed, having the Birthsign of the Lady will result in the Fortify attribute effect when you access one of the altars. Next up is the Lover Birthsign, which gives the Lover's Kiss greater power, which casts Paralyze for 10 seconds on touch and damage fatigue 120 points on self once per day. So if you do this wrong, you'll both hit the ground. But this of course makes both of these effects, Paralyze and damage fatigue, available for your own spellcrafts, letting you direct the damage fatigue somewhere else. Last of the Birthsigns to go over is the Serpent, which gives you the stacked greater power with a simple name called Serpent Spell. This causes damage health 3 points for 20 seconds on touch, cure poison on self, dispel 90 points on self, and damage fatigue 100 points on self. Just like the Lover's Stone, if you're after just a bunch of different effects to play around with, you'll gain access to damage health, cure poison, dispel, and damage fatigue if you choose the Serpent Birthsign. While I said any character you choose to play can be a viable mage, some of the playable races are just naturally gifted in Magic. So these build templates will be designed around that. And I call them templates because if you're not satisfied with certain aspects of them, it's easy enough to move things around. Seeing as I don't specialize in builds, I am going to cover one of these and let my pal Bad Company Sarge take it from there for the remainder of them. It's fair to assume here that the favorite attributes are going to be Intelligence and Willpower. Intelligence, which helps determine maximum Magicka, and Willpower, which helps determine Magicka regeneration. Our first suggested build is one I would like to call the Breton Protagonist. Breton is regarded by many as the best race to start as, so why bury the lead, right? This template is of course Breton with either origin, and for Birthsign, Mage if you're going to be more of a spellcaster, or Lord if you're going to be more up close and personal or just want extra protection. Since the Breton has bonuses to pretty much every spell school except for Destruction, setting Destruction as one of your major skills is a good bet. Restoration and Alteration as major skills would be beneficial as well. With this layout, combining the bonus to your Magicka pool and the ridiculous 50% magic resistance they all come with, makes the Breton a great and durable magic user with the room to be adapted to another playstyle if you change your mind. Now here's a real professional with his own build suggestions. Take it away, Sarge.
If you're not quite ready to give up the good old melee madness or stealth archer playstyles just yet, then fear not. Both can be augmented with the right spells. My Bound Battler build here is a Dark Elf who loves to fight, but does so with bound weapons and armour, all courtesy of the Conjuration School of Magic. Just summon your weapons and armour when you need them, and never have to worry about equipment condition again. Dark Elves start out with the Ancestor Guardian Greater Power, meaning you can summon a ghost to help you in your battles, without it costing you any Magicka. And to help with your magic pool further, why not pick the Mage sign for an extra 50 points, without any downsides. By using the Bound Bow, Bound Sword, and superior Bound Armour spells, you can make yourself battle ready in just a few seconds' time. The major advantage of this build is that you get a full set of Daedric gear, without having it use up a couple of 100 points of carry weight. Casual clothes of the street, and a summon suit for fighting. What's not to love? Probably is worth custom crafting your own summon weapon spells though, because we all know that 15 seconds isn't long enough to last in any situation. Magic can be a key part of your build, or just something thrown in to augment it. For my Argonian adventurer, I made heavy use of illusion magic. This was a challenge build, where I could only use the skills that Argonians have raised at the start of the game, and illusion was a lifesaver in this instance, as otherwise I was just a melee build with no armour. But with illusion magic, I was then suddenly able to calm strong foes who I wasn't ready to fight yet, paralyze tough individuals who would take some time to cut down to size, and frenzy groups of enemies to turn your opponent's numbers against them. You can pick pretty much any birth sign with this build, but I went with the Lord sign as I was scared of running around in basic clothing while in melee range. While the melee side of things was what was needed to finish a fight, magic was clearly the element which let me win my battles. If the idea of having to switch between various spells in the middle of combat sounds a little overwhelming, then why not just use magic as an augment to an already powerful build? My Lawbringer here is a Nord who very much fits into the Paladin archetype. He wears heavy armour, uses the Lordstone for more resistances, and has the Woad racial power, which can make him even tougher once per day. But in order to make him even more of a tank, I used a spellcrafting station in order to make my own custom spell, which gave me another shield effect, increased my maximum HP, and gave me health regen for a short while. I crafted this spell to use up almost all of my Magicka and be the sort of thing I cast at the start of combat and then never had to think about again. A nice simple combat buff that would make any fight a fair sight easier. Maybe you want more of a direct focus on magic with your build? Well, why not go a full glass cannon destruction mage with my Mythic Dawn Cultist, a high elf from Somerset Isle who is about as squishy as an Oblivion character can be, but also has access to a host of deadly spells. Use Destruction to cast deadly elemental blasts or kill enemies with a single touch. Conjuration can come into play here again, but this time more for summoning Daedra to assist you in battle, even if that assistance is just to cause a distraction and let you run away to safety. Mysticism lets you steal souls from those you kill, which is a must for any evil wizard. And finally there's Illusion, which can allow you to charm NPCs and trick them into seeing you as something other than pure evil, or not see you at all with the invisibility spell. I originally went with the mage sign when I made this build, as I figured the 100 points of extra magicka from being a high elf would be more than enough to work with. But if you want to lean even further into the glass cannon side of things, then you could always pick the apprentice instead, getting another 100 points of magicka, but also making yourself more susceptible to magical attacks. If you want to see even more of this build, then good news, there's a full video of this character on my main channel, Bad Company Sarge. Head on over there if you want some more in-depth builds, with recommended equipment, all the stats you should focus on, and even backstories to help bring the characters to life.
At this point, I feel like it's important to bring up spell effectiveness. This number you will see at the bottom of your spell menu, and will go down if you wear armor instead of clothing. When your spell effectiveness is less than 100%, that means all of the spells that you yourself are casting will also be less than 100% when it comes to magnitude or duration. Let's say you have a frenzy spell with 100 magnitude, which sets it to affect level 25 or higher enemies. In normal cases, this means it is uncapped. Any enemy can be affected by it. But if you choose to wear armor and then try to cast it on a high level enemy, the frenzy spell will have dropped in magnitude, which means it's no longer uncapped and will no longer work on enemies 25 or higher. So the frenzy spell, as well as just illusion magic as a whole, works the best when you're wearing clothing. That is an extreme case though, and strictly pertains to the spells that you use magicka to cast. So being a heavily armored mage is still a viable way to play. And the better your skill with the armor that you're wearing, the more spell effectiveness you'll gain, up to a cap of 95%. And should you choose to wear heavy armor, there are options that work at full effectiveness regardless of what you're wearing. 4, in fact. Greater powers that you gain from character creation or get from doomstones, quest rewards, or other places all work at 100%. There are also enchanted weapons, stabs, and scrolls. Enchanted weapons and stabs operate similarly as enchanted weapons go and need to be recharged after so many uses. So that same frenzy effect I was talking about as a spell can be added to, say, a bow, and if you top out the magnitude, it will create the same effect, but rely on charges rather than magicka. But at that point, you won't have to worry whether or not you're wearing armor for it to work. This is the trade-off to ensure that you're doing exactly what it says on the item's tooltip. When needed, these can be recharged with filled soul gems, the Mages Guild members that recharge items if you're rich, or Varla stones from Ayleid Ruins that fully recharge all of your magical things at once. Scrolls are of course separate because they cannot be recharged and are a one-time use item. Simply equipping them from your miscellaneous item tab or your spell menu will prepare it in your spell slot, at which point you can cast it and then it's gone. Now the scrolls you find, especially when you're fighting casters of any flavor, will vary in usefulness. So what I recommend is holding on to the higher level spells if you can tell they are higher level, like the summon scrolls or the ones that just deal tons of damage, and selling the ones that have more specific use cases or affect lower level targets. Let's talk about wearing cloth, because I know some of you want to look the part. Some may also just like a challenge, and others, like me, just may not want to worry about spell effectiveness. Why can't I enunciate? And some of you are just watching this for background noise, and for that, I thank you. As we've gone over, spells like Shield and Summoned Armor can more than make up for not having equipped physical armor. You can even just enchant your clothing and jewelry with shield enchantments, and they'll provide armor. Clothwares will lose out on one equipment slot though if they want to maintain effectiveness, and that is the shield that's held in the offhand, not the spell that's called shield. Excluding the shield slot, players have 5 clothing slots and 3 accessory slots: head, torso, hands, legs, feet, 2 rings, and an amulet. Even though there are plenty of stylish robes to choose from, they are unfortunately an outfit item which takes up both the torso and leg slot, whereas a shirt and trousers take up 1 each. If you are looking to maximize enchantments as a cloth wearer, that is to say 8 total, the shirt and trouser or skirt combo is the way to go. And there are a ton of options of clothing too. You can find many clothing items if you search the rooms in the Mage's Guild halls, as well as Rindir's staves and the copious coin purse in the Imperial City Market. You might find difficulty in locating some wrist or hand coverings to enchant that don't count as armor, and that's because there's pretty much only one that counts as clothing. Well, provided you didn't throw them away, the wrist irons from the very beginning of the game count as clothing and can be enchanted, just like anything else. If you did unfortunately throw them away, don't worry, there are 2 in the dungeon from the Mehrunes Razor add-on known as Sundercliff Watch. You can find those inside of the jail in the underground village there. Clearing the rest of the dungeon is entirely up to you, it's huge. As a caster of magical mayhem, the more powerful spells you have, the more magicka it is going to cost. So, having ways to recover that magicka, especially quickly, are also important. The first way that requires the least amount of resources, that is to say an hour of in-game time, is the wait function. Provided you haven't taken the Atronach birth sign or have the Astral Vapors disease, waiting for an hour will fully recover your magicka pool. When fights go on a little bit longer, that's when consumables come in. Most humanoid enemies can drop various potions, including the more common potions of sorcery, and alchemy merchants can be found selling these too, which have variants of potency from weak to strong, but we'll talk about potions more in depth in a little bit. If you have a particularly large magicka pool, the blue Welkin stones that you can find within Ayleid Ruins, while a little bit heavier than potions, can recover all of your magicka when used. While we're on the subject of ancient Ayleid Ruins, Ayleid wells that can be found outdoors with a glowing blue pillar of light, when activated, can recover your magicka and also fortify your magicka for 50 points for 300 seconds, or 5 minutes. And these wells recharge after 24 hours. Alchemy gets its own section in this guide, and it's not because it's under the mage archetype. It's that it has 2 separate but extremely valuable functions. The first function is it's the easiest way to make gold in the game, and gold is needed for a lot of things as a mage, mostly using guild services like purchasing spells, recharging items, and doing your own spell making and enchanting, all cost gold. Secondly, the best Magicka Recovery potions are the ones you can make yourself, and because you can walk into any mage's guild, ask to join, and then have free access to the reagents just lying around, as well as a full set of novice alchemy equipment, you can then loot all the food you see, mash it into a bottle, and sell it back to the guild for a tidy profit. But what if you did this on a bigger scale? This is not going to be a full alchemy guide section inside of the guide that's already massive. Instead, I'm just going to show you what alchemy recipe I use to make a bunch of potions to sell, leveling alchemy and mercantile in the process, and also the ingredients to get to mass produce a bunch of Magicka Recovery potions as well. The Restore Fatigue potion that we're going to use to sell is made with green stained cup caps and grapes, or almost any other food item, while the Restore Magicka potion we're going to make uses Bog Beacon Asco caps and flax seeds. I'm sharing both recipes at once because all of the ingredients can be gathered in 2 separate locations. You will find a whole bunch of green stained cup caps and Bog Beacon Asco caps in the Blackwood Forest outside of Leyawiin, and I consider Fort Blueblood a good place to start from if you have that location discovered. You'll find the green stained cups everywhere, but the Bog Beacons will be more clustered near some of the large trees of the area, and are easier to spot at nighttime, hence the name. Then for the grapes and flax seeds, we'll just need to head to the outskirts of Skingrad, where you'll be able to take tons of grapes from the vineyards here, and if you start walking towards the wilderness, you'll find these multicolored flowers in clusters, which result in flax seeds when picked. After completing this collectathon, select one of your alchemy apparati, combining the green stained cup caps and grapes first for your restore fatigue potions, which again are made for selling and will likely level up your alchemy way past apprentice. Then you can focus on your Magicka potions by combining the bog beacon asco caps and the flax seeds. And I highly suggest naming these ones with a dash or other symbol at the start of the name so it goes to the top of your consumable inventory. After this, you can head to the nearest general goods or potion merchant and drown them in the fatigue potions you've made while making several thousand gold. If you quickly empty out your pockets, you need only wait 3 days for all of these reagents to regrow, and you can repeat this method as many times as you want. Now that you hopefully have gold to spend on spells and the potions to support mass casting, it's time for the training montage. At some point, I was going to mention that the game has skill trainers for every skill in the game, but in Magic's case, it's not really necessary anymore in the remastered version. And getting 5 skill levels every level up from trainers costs gold, which is better spent on more spells in my opinion, so I hope it's fine that we skip that part. Spell leveling in Oblivion Remaster is a little different from the original, like I said at the very beginning, and by a little I mean completely. It is simply way faster and more efficient now that it's based on Magicka cost instead of how many times a spell is cast. So say you're chugging a whole bunch of Magicka potions to keep yourself topped off and just repeatedly casting a high cost spell for your rank, you're going to level that school of magic very quickly. Unless your spell is target or on touch, but that's what Conjuration is for. At the rate of increase now, you might be able to go from novice to master in about 25 minutes faster if you're using custom spells. For this section though, I'll be going over just the spells the game provides, just to keep it simple. But I will include how I make my training spells in the spellmaking section. So get that gold out, it's time for some spell shopping. These first 4 spells are for alteration leveling purposes, and you can find all these spells for sale at the Cheydinhal Mages Guild. My recommendations here are getting Protect Other for Novice, Heat Shell for Apprentice, both from Trayvon the Redguard, and then for Journeyman, Lightning Shield, and then Glacial Wall for Expert. Both of these are from Orintur. Clearly, I just wanted to make sure that you got all of the shield spell effects. Now for the Conjuration spells I recommend for leveling, and you can get all of these over at the Coral Mages Guild. For Novice, this will actually be 4 bound item spells. Bound Boots, Bound Dagger, Bound Gauntlets, and Bound Helmet. I'm suggesting 4 bound item spells for the Novice section because you don't really get a summon unless you choose it as a major skill. For Apprentice, I recommend Summon Scamp, which is also sold by Alberic Liddy. Then for Journeyman, Summon Dremora, and Summon Skeleton Champion for Expert. Both of these are sold by Athragar, who is also often in the Coral Guildhall. On to spells for leveling Destruction. We'll find these over in the Skingrad Mages Guildhall. For Novice, I recommend getting Cold Touch, which can be purchased from Druja, or if Destruction is a major skill, you have it already. For Apprentice, I recommend the Shock spell, which is purchased from Sulinus Vicinus, and for Journeyman, we'll go for a classic Fireball spell, which is purchased from Viggy the Cautious, and once you hit Expert in Destruction, Firestorm, which can be purchased from Adrian Barine, who is in the Skingrad Guild, or Romanus Polus if you're at the Arcane University at the time. Now for the spells for leveling Illusion, and you can acquire all of these over in the Breville Mages Guildhall. If you're starting at Novice, I recommend getting Alluring Gaze or Captivate via the recommendation here. And for Apprentice, my suggestion is the Moonlight spell, and both Moonlight and Alluring Gaze can be purchased from Delphine Gend. For Journeyman, Shadow Shape, and for Expert, Shadow, and you can get both of these spells from Ita Rienus. Next up in the training montage is Mysticism, and just about everything you'll need Mysticism spell-wise can be found at the Leowin Mages Guild. If starting at Novice, I recommend getting the Minor Dispel spell, and at Apprentice, getting yourself Soul Trap, if you didn't purchase it already in the Market District of the Imperial City. Both Minor Dispel and Soul Trap can be purchased from Alves Uvenim. For Journeyman, my recommendation here is Greater Life Detection, and for Expert, Superior Spell Absorption. Both of these can be purchased from Agata. More like I gotta have them spells. And for the final app, Restoration. Where normally I would send you to the Mages Guild in Anvil, the spells I'm going to recommend can just be purchased from a chapel priest, or you start with them by default, in the case of the novice spell Heal Minor Wounds, which we all start with. As for Apprentice, I recommend getting Cure Poison, for Journeyman, Cure Disease, and for Expert, Superior Convalescence. If you are still in Leowin, all of these can be purchased at the Leowin Chapel from Avras Adas, the priest there. Hopefully, to prevent any confusion, I'm going to walk through the training process really quick using the Mysticism training as the example. If you have your stack of Magicka Recovery potions, I suggest having those on the item wheel if you don't already. Starting at Novice with the Minor Dispel spell, continue casting and refilling your Magicka as needed until you hit 25 Mysticism, which is Apprentice. Now we switch to Soul Trap, which is an on-touch spell, but is a hostile action against friendly NPCs. So one of your first options is to go out into the field or into some dungeons and start casting this on anything that attacks you, because as a touch spell, it needs to make contact with a target to give you experience. And if you bring empty soul gems to fill as you're doing this, hey, even better. One of your other options is having a little bit of experience in Conjuration and summoning, say, a skeleton or a ghost, and casting Soul Trap repeatedly on them. Either way, Soul Trap gives a solid chunk of experience anyway, so going from 26 to 50 shouldn't take too long. Once you do hit 50, which is to say Journeyman, it's time to switch it up again to Greater Life Detection. This is another self-cast spell, so just like Minor Dispel, you can continuously cast this wherever is comfortable and use Magicka Restoration potions when needed. Or, like Soul Trap, you can take this out into the field and level your Mysticism more passively. So no matter how you decide to level from 51 to 75, that's the point where you hit Expert, where our fourth spell, Superior Spell Absorption, is our last lap before hitting Master. And the training works just like Minor Dispel, but a much higher Magicka cost. And at a base cost of a few hundred Magicka, it will level you very quickly if you keep your Magicka filled. So you can do it the boring way just by standing stationary and casting it a whole bunch of times, or you can test it against other casters and other things that send magical bolts your way. If your Restore Magicka potions are running a little dry, casting this means you'll have a chance to recover Magicka if you get pelted with spells. But this is the last leg of experience gained for Mysticism, and I feel like you've got the gist at this point, I hope. If not, hey, that's what the comment section is for, and I'm sure there are plenty of Oblivion veterans willing to assist as well. Whew, okay, training is done, so now we can finally get into why the magic system in Oblivion is so dang special, as it introduced a versatile spell-making system along with its own kind of refined version of Enchanting, both of which can be performed at their respective altars, but there are only a couple of places that you can access these altars, so that's what we're going over next. When it comes to the enchanting and spell-making altars, gaining access to them is important, and we have two flavors of access. The first flavor, which I would like to call the sweet one, because good sweets cost good money, is Frostcrag Spire. And thanks to the remaster's new draw distance, you can see it as soon as you get out of the Imperial City sewers. This is the Wizard Tower player home in the mountains east of Bruma, and after you gain entry, either by lockpicking your way in, or stumbling upon the key in the chest that's just around the other side of the building, the book directly in front of you once you enter will open up the rest of the tower's large interior when you read it, and this book will also serve as a buyer's guide, directing you to Arellenway at the Mystic Emporium in the Imperial City Market to get Frostcrag Spire furnished. The improvements she sells include the Mage Tallow candles, which are needed to activate the altars in the tower. But when you come here, you're going to want 4,000 to 7,000 gold worth to afford both of those Mage Tallow candle boxes. But once you have said Mage Tallow candles, you can take them back to Frostcrag Spire and activate the altars there.
You've been to all the guild halls, haven't you? Well, then you're all set. Congratulations! You'll need to speak to Raminus Polus at the Arcane University now. Look at you, moving up in the world. How wonderful.
Flavor 2 to get access to the altars is Savory, because this is the more immersive method that you're meant to savor, and the rewards being worth your trials. Before making all of us hungry, I'm talking about access to the Arcane University, which is lengthy, but also immersive, and requires you to go to each of the guild halls, finish each of the recommendation quests, and after which, of course, you'll gain access to the Arcane University on the southeastern side of the Imperial City. This is, of course, worth it on many levels because you get access to the facilities here, the Chironasium for enchantments, and the Praxographical Center, where you can perform spellmaking. And just like the mages guilds themselves, the majority of the buildings in the Arcane University have a take whatever you want because you're the protagonist policy. Savory, like I said, but if you combine sweet and savory, Frostcrag Spire does have the most robust interior herb garden you'll find this side of Cameron's Paradise, and teleportation circles to each of the guild halls on the second floor balcony, all free of charge. And the Arcane University has some master spell merchants that are only accessible once you gain entry. Point is, you can go sweet or savory, but also both. We have finally made it to spellmaking, the reason I started making this guide in the first place. And what a journey this has been, thank you for coming along with me. So let's open up the spellmaking altar and get started. On the left side here, you will see all of your available spell effects from things your character knows and is able to cast. Again, this does not only include spells. This also includes Birthsigns, abilities and passives from the race you chose, powers from Doomstones, even passive effects you've acquired through doing quests or becoming a vampire. So the spellmaking altar is basically like looking into an actual magic mirror. All that you are to channel into something new. And even though the possibilities are nearly endless, we're going to start simple and do some tweaks and improvements as we do this step by step. So we'll start by improving the flare spell that we started with at the beginning of the game, and this will be an apprentice level spell. So on the left menu here, we will pick fire damage, and here come the parameters. The first one is range. Usually you have a choice between self, touch, and target. Self is casting it on yourself, touch is in melee range, and target is a ranged spell. For this example, we're going to pick target. The first slider is magnitude, and that is the power of the spell. In this case, it is the spell's damage, and we'll bring that up to 6 just like the original flare spell. And you may also notice this number on the lower left-hand side that increases as the parameters do. The number is the spell's current Magicka cost, according to your skills and luck. And another cost that also goes up is the gold cost to make the spell on the lower right-hand side. This is why there was a section on making money. Anyway, the reason I bring up Magicka costs is the area slider aggressively increases the magical cost of the spell because it's increasing its explosion radius. If it hits a lot of targets, it's going to cost a lot to cast. So for this example, we're skipping the area slider for now, making it a single target spell. Now moving on to duration, we're going to set that to 2. This turns the spell into one that does damage over time, now doing 6 fire damage per second for 2 seconds. So this modified flare spell now does 6 damage 2 times for a total of 12. If you save the changes on this spell effect and go back over to the effects menu, we're now going to scroll down to the weakness effects. We're going to add a weakness to fire, set its range to target just like the first effect, and then crank the magnitude up to 100. And as for duration, we'll set that to 3. So on impact, the target will be inflicted by weakness to fire 100% for 3 seconds. Now, if weakness is on a spell that also does damage, it doesn't go into effect until the second cast, which is why we set the weakness effect to 3 seconds instead of 2, which is enough time to throw out another firebolt that will then do a total of 24 damage. And yes, this can be amplified further, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're now on to custom spell number 2, which is another apprentice level destruction spell. And our first effect we're going to go for is a damage fatigue effect. But instead of on target, we're going to leave it on touch. And by sacrificing range, touch spells and self-cast spells are cheaper to cast. We'll then set the magnitude to 3, which is 3 damage, for a duration of 3 seconds, which maths out to 3 fatigue damage per second for 3 seconds, or 9 total. You might notice, by doing lower magnitude and higher duration, coupled with the on-touch effect, this spell ends up being really cheap to cast. And it's worth knowing moving forward that on-touch effects as well as duration effects will always be cheaper than burst damage ranged effects. After adding damage fatigue, we'll now add fire damage again, making it on target, not on touch, for a magnitude or damage of 6. But additionally, we're going to move the area slider up to 10 and make the duration 2 seconds. So now this little firebolt will have a 10-foot explosion and do its 6 damage per second for 2 seconds for a total of 12. Now to cap off the second custom spell, we'll add weakness to fire, make it on target just like the fire damage, max out the magnitude to 100, set the area to 10 feet, just like the fire damage again, and put the duration up to 3 seconds. So now a question might be, why the heck is there damage fatigue on touch when this is clearly a ranged spell? Well, some mages can only backpedal so fast, especially if they're trying to hit an enemy with a firebolt. Any enemy that is melee oriented, especially those wielding two-handers, use up a lot of fatigue. If they manage to get right up in your face and run out of fatigue while you're casting this spell, which is signified by their health bar flashing, the damage fatigue on touch should pretty quickly send their fatigue to 0, knocking them to the floor, giving you ample time to get away and continue casting your little explosive firebolts at a safer distance. But you've already seen how effective on-touch spells are. What if we did that with all 3 elements? So now we move on to custom spell number 3, and this one is for Journeyman Destruction. That's 50 skill or higher. Just like our very first spell, we're going to begin with fire damage. Have the range set to on touch, set its magnitude to 4 and its duration to 2 seconds. No area on this one. Next, we'll grab frost damage with the same deal. On touch, magnitude 4, 2-second duration. And now, repeat the same thing with shock damage. On touch, 4 magnitude, 2 seconds. 3 lower power elements like this instead of one singular, very powerful one is more cost effective and more colorful. Now, we're going to add all 4 of the magic-based weaken effects, starting with weakness to fire, on touch, magnitude 100 for a duration of 4 seconds. Then, weakness to frost, on touch, magnitude 100, 4 seconds. And again, same thing with shock, touch 104. Now, to cap this off, we will then add weakness to magic at the very end. Unlike the other elemental weakness effects, weakness to magic works on virtually all magical effects, including itself. So we'll go ahead and put that on touch, crank it up to 100 like everything else, and add a duration of 4 seconds. The first touch of this spell will only do a measly 24 elemental damage. That's 8 from fire, 8 from frost, and 8 from shock. But a second cast from this spell triples your damage output, because all those weakness effects activate on that second cast, and subsequent casts if you keep them within that 4-second window, letting the power of your spell exponentially grow the more you cast it. Most enemies won't be able to stand up to this spell, so why don't we make it better with the step-by-step for custom spell number 4. And there's one thing we haven't done yet. We've only been focusing on destruction-based magic, but spellmaking allows you to add any spell effect from any school as long as you know how to cast it. So this will still be a journeyman level destruction spell, but with alteration and illusion mixed in too. So the first effect we will start with is Drain Speed. We will make it on touch with a magnitude of 20 and a duration of 4 seconds. Next will be 3 elemental damage effects. We will add fire, frost, and shock damage on touch for 4 magnitude for 4 seconds. Then we'll add the illusion spell Rally on touch for 40 magnitude for 4 seconds. And after that, we will add the alteration spell Shield, make the range on self, very important, make it on self, for a magnitude of 15 for a duration of 4 seconds. Then we will add the weakness stack like we did before, weakness to fire, frost, and shock on touch, 100 magnitude each for a duration of 4 seconds, and then dead last, weakness to magic on touch, 100 for 4 seconds. Congratulations, you've now made the custom spell that I like to call the Hand of Heck. This is a devastating multicast touch spell that slows creatures temporarily, does all 3 elemental damage at once, shields the caster, that's you, for 15 points, and applies weakness. And following casts grow in damage exponentially, and before you know it, your enemy has melted from the most destructive high fives they'll ever experience. And make sure that if you decide to name this spell, put a dash or a symbol at the front so it'll be at the top of your spell menu, because that's where I keep mine. So now with the step-by-step spell making complete, I hope you have a better grasp on these spell making altars and start playing around with the different effects that you have to make some weird and wacky spells. Just make sure to save beforehand so you don't crap up your spell menu too much, because there is no way to delete them, and I'm sure all of us could do with a little less scrolling as opposed to more. And if you liked the Hand of Heck, stick around, because I've got more recipes to show you, and they can go from good utility-based spells to downright silly. So let's get into that. The first of the custom spell recipes I want to share is the one I told you about when it came to spell leveling, the spell leveling recipe that is simple and straightforward. Basically, all you have to do is choose one effect from the skill you want to raise and make it a touch spell. Crank its sliders up until just before you see the red text, where the Magicka cost maxes out for your rank. Then, you can add any self-cast buff to this spell with a minimum magnitude and duration. I recommend Shield or Feather or Light for this. Doing it this way will give you a quick casting training spell that you don't even need a target for, because of that tiny on-self effect. And since you are using this for training, I recommend having a torch with your weapon sheathed or a bow unsheathed for the fastest possible touch cast. Oh, and also when you go to name your training spells, I do not recommend putting a symbol at the beginning of the name, because you'll be done with them, where then you can leave it with all the other peasant spells. This illusion spell that can be cast whenever, because it is a novice level spell, is called Charm Slap, and it is a simple disposition maxing spell, so you don't have to schmooze with the persuasion minigame to get info ever again in this playthrough. This is a simple charm on touch for 100 magnitude for a duration of 1 to 3 seconds. Your choice. And the duration is so little because the menu freezes in dialogue, and the magical effects will stay active for however long you're in said dialogue. Now for the upgraded version, Charm Slap Plus. This one is an apprentice level restoration spell with the same basis, but not only does this max out disposition with the NPC you hit with it, it makes your repair hammer unbreakable, heavily discounts crafting and buying spells, improves haggling, and lets you invest in shops. Like before, this is Charm on Touch for 100 magnitude for a second, and then 3 Fortify effects on self. Fortify Luck by 50 on self for 1 second, and Fortify Armor and Mercantile on self for 100 each for 1 second. According to this spell, you only need 1 second to be the best merchant in all of Cyrodiil. The next recipe I would like to share is the Super Shield. This is an apprentice level alteration spell. Sometimes it's just good to be protected, so why not stack all 4 shield effects and add some feather for good measure. This is the kind of spell I thought of when Sarge shared his Lawbringer build in the builds section. So like I said, this spell uses all 4 shield effects on self, 5 magnitude each for a total of 20 armor when active, for a duration of 20 seconds, as well as a feather effect on self, 100 magnitude, that's 100 extra carry weight, for 20 seconds as well. You can carry more, move faster, and are better protected. What's not to like? Next one, it doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but I call it Plain Plod, or Plain Plotter. It's an apprentice restoration and alteration spell, which on the surface is a simple water walking spell combined with a small heal to make it extra helpful if you need to cross lava in the realm of Oblivion. This will also work as just a basic heal over time spell if you need something better than heal minor wounds. So it is restore health on self for 5 points for 15 seconds, and water walking on self for 15 seconds. Next up in the recipes is one of my favorites, the Weaken Beacon. This is a journeyman spell for destruction with a tiny bit of illusion, and it is a spell that is best used in tandem with an enchanted weapon or staff. It fires a bolt of magical weakness at the enemy, which doubles the potency of all incoming magic effects, as well as marking the target with light for the spell's duration. And like I had mentioned in the step-by-step, weakness to magic is unique in the fact that it can apply also to itself. If you've ever wanted to mark an enemy for deletion, this is a way to do that. And the effects are light on target for 3 magnitude for 15 seconds. And of course, our weakness to magic on target 100 magnitude, that's 100%, for a duration of 15 seconds. Now for the spell recipe for a restoration/alteration journeyman spell called One Trip Skip. If you want to get the groceries from the cart in one trip or just want to jump higher and run faster, this spell can do all 3. Fortifying acrobatics, as this spell does, also reduces fall damage, so this can make mountain descents much safer too. You can also make higher bonus duplicates of this spell and cast them sequentially to get absurd map clearing distances with a single bound, if you like. I just made a journeyman one and stopped there. This one includes the effects Feather 100 on self for 20 seconds, Fortify acrobatics and athletics for 40 on self for 10 seconds. Next is a pure illusion spell for journeyman called Rabble Rouser. As an illusionist, sometimes the temptation to be an agent of chaos is strong. This spell is the manifestation of that chaos and causes the human, elf, beast folk, and Dremora caught within this spell's 20-foot radius to become hyper-aggressive from frenzy and rally, attacking anyone they can see. The light effect will help mark who is frenzied, and a small self-cast invisibility is so you don't become a primary target when it first goes off. Remember, for this illusion spell to work on enemies level 25 and above, you need to be wearing cloth, that is to say, no armor, so your effectiveness is at 100%. The recipe is as follows: Frenzy on target, magnitude 100, which is level 25 or uncapped, 20-foot area for 15 seconds, then Rally on target with a 50 magnitude, 20-foot area, and 15-second duration, then Light on target with 3 magnitude, 20-foot area, 15-second duration, and then Invisibility on self for 4 seconds. I tested this at the Arcane University. It was hilarious. My hands are clean. Say hello to the Weekend Beacon's klepto cousin, the Burglar Beacon. This is an expert level mysticism and destruction based spell with a single sprinkle of illusion. Just like before, this beacon spell lights up the target and applies a weakness to magic effect. However, it also applies a weakness to poison for assassins to maximize any poisons that they've oiled their weapon with. This spell has a fourth effect, which is a 25 magnitude telekinesis that lasts 25 seconds. This means it can also be used for long-range theft, item inspection, and even moving bodies, thanks to the remastered version of Oblivion. This isn't the only application though, because paralyzed NPCs can also be moved with telekinesis. If you can cast this spell on your target a few times and hit them with a paralyze from poison or another spell, you can then use Burglar Beacon again to pick them up. At that point, you can dunk them in dangerous liquids, set them near traps, or just lob them off a mountain for the heck of it. The recipe for this spell, of course, starts with Light of 3 magnitude on target for 6 seconds, then Telekinesis with a magnitude of 25, which results in 25 feet as well, on target for 25 seconds, then Weakness to Poison 100 on target for 6 seconds, and Weakness to Magic 100 on target for 6 seconds. I was happy to add another goofy spell to the list, and I hope you get some enjoyment out of it too. This next one was just a passing thought, and then I realized, hey, it's actually doable with the magic system in this game. This spell I like to call Soul Farm, and it is a mixture of destruction, mysticism, and conjuration at expert level. There are plenty of ways to fill soul gems, but since we can soul trap our own summons, what if you could cast a single spell that would summon a creature and soul trap it seconds later? For a fleeting idea, I'm actually pretty happy with how this spell turned out. It will throw out a large frost projectile and summon a creature simultaneously. And since frost projectiles basically become a trap for the duration on impact, they'll immediately trigger the soul trap and start taking damage without going hostile. Now, cards on the table, I got as far as common soul gems for this automation process. If you can go up to greater soul gems and beyond with this kind of spell, please let me know in the comments. But here's the basis of the recipe. Frost damage on target for 15 magnitude, 10-foot area for 5 seconds, then Soul Trap on target, 10 feet for 5 seconds. Then there's 3 options from common to lesser to petty, depending on the soul gems you want to fill. For the common version of this spell, I chose Summon Flame Atronach on self for 6 seconds. For lesser, it was Summon Scamp for 6 seconds, and for petty, it was Summon Skeleton on self for 6 seconds. The Flame Atronach's Frost weakness did a lot of heavy lifting to ensure that a common soul gem could get filled. So again, if you can get it up to greater and keep it as an expert level spell, consider it a challenge. I'd love to see what you come up with. Our next recipe is a restoration-based one called Divine Remedy, which is an expert level spell. This is a high level one, but is basically a castable temple blessing. If you've been diseased, poisoned, or had your stats damaged, cast this as needed until your stats are back to normal. This will also restore some health over time. Divine Remedy will save you a trip to a town chapel, especially if you've had a run-in with some vampires and don't feel like going back to town yet. And welcome to the biggest recipe listed. The first effect for Divine Remedy is Cure Disease on self. Second is Cure Poison on self. Then Restore Attribute for all 7 attributes on self, 3 magnitude for 1 second. And finally, Restore Health on self, magnitude 5 for 10 seconds. Before you hit create spell on this one, make sure all of these are on self casts. I messed up making this one several times just because of all the attribute restoration. Last of the spell recipes we have to go over is a master level destruction and illusion crossover spell. This one's named Stop Storm. This spell fires out a multi-damage frost storm that causes most enemies to trip over themselves with a paralyze effect and creatures to have their speed drained enough to slow to a crawl. While they're stuck inside the storm, they'll start taking damage from fire, frost, and shock, and be marked with a weakness to magic effect for a short duration. If enemies survive the first storm, this weakness window can be for follow-up attacks with either another even stronger stop storm, or strikes from enchanted weapons. And the recipe is as follows. Paralyze on target with an area of 10 feet for 1 second, then drain speed on target for 30 magnitude, 15-foot area for 5 seconds, fire damage on target with a magnitude of 3, 15-foot area, 6 seconds, frost damage on target, 15 magnitude, 15-foot area for 5 seconds, then shock damage on target of 10 magnitude, 15-foot area for 1 second. And finally, weakness to magic on target, 100 magnitude with a 15-foot area for 5 seconds. That's plenty to play with the spell-making altar, but what about enchanting? To cover all the bases, I want to mention soul trapping and soul gems, just in case anybody is unfamiliar. First of all, souls come in 6 flavors: petty, lesser, common, greater, grand, and black. Petty souls you can find in most basic creatures, like deer, dogs, rats, mud crabs, whereas grand souls are only found in the biggest, beefiest of creatures, like gloomwraiths, liches, minotaur lords, and zivili. And I'll probably have these listed on screen because there's a lot. Black soul gems can only contain the souls of the humanoid races, as well as vampires and Dremora, and are always of grand quality, at least supposed to be. And the Mages Guild questline does go into the process in which black soul gems are made. So if you find yourself with empty soul gems, which you usually will if you go into any dungeon, you then need to get yourself a means of soul trapping, and that can be via the soul trap spell, which is an apprentice mysticism spell. The Mysticism Mages Guild is in Leowin, but most spell merchants sell it. But also you can find yourself a randomly enchanted weapon that does soul trap as well, or a sword by the name of Umbra, which I did cover in my Daedric Artifacts guide. Basically, as long as you have something to soul trap and something to hold souls in, you're all set. So then all you need to do is go out, find some enemies, or even summon them yourself, start putting soul trap on them and making sure they die while the soul trap is active. Then that soul will go into a soul gem that it fits in. Just be careful with your grand soul gems. If all your lower level gems are filled up and you get a petty soul, it'll go into the grand soul gem and ultimately kind of waste it. In fact, what I like to do is take all of my grand soul gems and stash them somewhere, or convert them to black soul gems as soon as possible, just so the smaller souls don't go into them by accident. And then if you have filled soul gems in your inventory, from your miscellaneous tab, you can activate the ones that have souls in them to recharge your magical weapons and or staffs. For recharging, I only recommend you use your petty to greater soul gems, because grand souls can give you the best quality enchantments at the altar. In either Frostcrag Spire or the enchanting building at the Arcane University known as the Chironasium, you'll find altars of enchanting, which will look very familiar now that you've messed around with spell making. So I don't think we need an entire step-by-step this time. But on the left side here, instead of spell effects immediately, you were instead shown the unenchanted gear that you have in your inventory. And from here, you can choose what item to enchant, then go to the next tab, which is your soul gem tab, and this will show all of your filled soul gems currently in your inventory. Aside from a few exceptions, you're going to ideally always want grand soul gems, because they'll give you the highest bonuses or the most charges, depending on armor or weapon. Once you've chosen a soul gem, you can move on to the final tab, which is your familiar spell effects tab. So here you can see the possibilities with weapons and the limitations with armor. We'll do armor first because it's pretty straightforward and outclassed by sigil stones, which we'll get to in a little bit. But basically, pick any piece of armor or accessory, grab your grand soul gem, and then choose one defensive or utility-based effect that is available in your effects menu. You'll notice right off that you're limited to only one choice. So if you are enchanting in this way, something I recommend is going with a fortify effect, or a shield effect, or even a feather effect. as these are useful in multiple scenarios instead of very specific. Same of choosing resist magic instead of resist fire or frost or shock. Something I will note though is certain constant effects like water walking and water breathing don't have magnitude or duration to worry about. So if you use a petty soul gem and put water walking or water breathing, it won't be any different than if you used a grand soul gem. So that's the time to use your lesser and petty soul gems, but it will also be pretty costly when it comes to gold. It's not all bad though, because weapon enchanting at the enchanting altar allows for multiple effects. So if you go back to the first tab and pick a weapon and a filled grand or black soul gem, I won't ask where you got them, you'll then see the power requirement on the bottom left hand side. The first number showing how much you've used and the second number showing your maximum based on the soul gem you chose. And of course you get the most by using a grand soul. The number in the middle with a little candle icon is the amount of charges this weapon is going to have. And just like in spellmaking, if you use a lot more lower power effects, you'll get more charges out of the deal. And you can use the same weakness logic when it comes to damage effects as spellmaking. So say you put an elemental damage effect or a damage health effect on your weapon, then a weakness to fire, frost, or shock, or a weakness to magic as the second effect. For a little bit of duration, you'll have a weapon that deals a lot of damage in its follow-up attacks, and if you are also casting spells with weakness, you can stack things up that much faster by swinging, then casting, then swinging, then casting on repeat until everything in front of you is dead. So there are a couple of recipes that I want to go over for enchanting, but it's not going to be as robust as the spellmaking section, obviously. But these are still powerful enchantments nonetheless, after which we'll talk a little bit about sigil stones. This first enchantment is called Soul Smash Slice / Stab, and is for any weapon type, and it is for those who need a weapon to just soul trap with a little damage to ensure the soul leaves the body shortly after impact. This enchanted weapon will be decently charged and keep itself and others fed with soul gems. It is also excellent when paired with Azura's Star, the legendary Daedric artifact that is a refillable grand soul gem, and I'd made a guide on that and the other Daedric artifacts, which you can find linked below and at the end of the video. Next up is quite a fun one in my opinion, and I call it Drain Conductor. Again, this one can be applied to just about any weapon. I put it on a dagger, and that's what I had the most fun with. But this weapon enchantment hits hard on first blood, and even harder on a second swipe for a temporary amount of health. If you pair this with an opening weaken spell, like Weaken Beacon or Stop Storm, which we went over already, you've got plenty of damage output to put most enemies down in a couple swings. This makes for an excellent weapon enchantment for assassins who want to keep it quick and quiet. This enchantment consists of two effects: Drain Health 100 on strike for 1 second, and Weakness to Magic on strike 100 magnitude for 2 seconds. Again, keep in mind, Drain Health is a temporary loss, but Weakness to Magic amplifies itself and Drain Health each swing. So keep swinging until you reach desired results. The third of the enchantment recipes is one I call the Bownanza bow. Wait, no, Bownanza. Why didn't I think of that earlier? Bownanza, that's what I decided. And yes, it is a bow enchantment. This one is similar to the frenzy bow I used in the example during the spell effectiveness section. But this enchanted bow fires a guaranteed frenzy effect if your shot connects with any human, elf, beast folk, or Dromora. Just like some of the previous spells, I've added light so you'll mark the one you tagged for the duration. The charges are quite a bit less on this one just because it's meant to be an opening move more so than a consistently used weapon. But the added effects are Frenzy on Strike 100 magnitude, that is uncapped, for 20 seconds, Light on Strike with a magnitude of 3 for 20 seconds, and Rally on Strike with a magnitude of 40 for 20 seconds.
Ah, yes. This is a big step for you, friend, whether you know it or not. Now you'll need to decide what sort of staff you're looking for. Something that fits you and your abilities. Shall we begin?
Also, a bonus enchanted thing, because I don't know where else to put it, I want to mention a staff as well. After the opening quest with the Arcane University, you have your custom staff made over at the Chironasium. The most powerful version of this staff, in my humiliated opinion, was the Mage's Staff of Paralysis. The amount of charges alone that this one gives you is incredible. And if you're stacking it on top of any weakness to Magicka spells that you have, you're going to get double the paralysis duration. Oh, did I mention that? When you have weakness to magic and the following spell has no magnitude, it just doubles duration instead? Well, now I've said it. There's so much freaking nuance in the magic in this game. It's crazy. Anyway, when you're asked what kind of staff you want, I recommend choosing Illusion in dialogue and then choosing Paralysis, because it seems like a lot more enemies are able to be paralyzed that didn't used to be in the original game, and I find it hilarious to paralyze ghosts. As for the last bit of enchanting, we're going to go over Sigil Stones. Firstly, Sigil Stones are the anchors of the Oblivion gates. You run into a gate, go up the Sigil Tower, take the stone, suddenly the gate closes, and you're left holding this dark orb that ends up in your miscellaneous inventory that you can select to use, and it will come up with a simplified enchanting menu. And after you've enchanted something with it, that Sigil Stone is destroyed. The enchantment that these Sigil Stones come with are from a randomized pool that generates each time you pull the Sigil Stone from the tower. So, if you decide to save scum, which a lot of us do already, you can save before you take the stone, check your inventory if it's something you want, and then reload it if it's not. So these will pretty much surpass whatever a Grand Soul Gem can do when it comes to armor and accessories. So if you find yourself Transcendent Sigil Stones that offer you Feather, or Shield of any kind, or Fortify Magicka, those are some of the ones I recommend to put onto your mage gear, especially if you've been waiting for something good to put on your shackles. When it comes to using Sigil Stones to enchant weapons, on the other hand, these are singular powerful effects from Transcendent Sigil Stones, particularly the elemental damage effects. But like I had shown in the Enchanting Altar section, you can put multiple effects on a weapon and make it just as strong, if not stronger, than these enchantments. So the choice is yours on that front. It's nice to have the option in case you want to just keep it simple, which sometimes we do. So we've gone over the magic schools, we've gone over leveling, we've gone over the different racial and birth sign traits that you can get, the importance of permanent effects, spell effectiveness, mage build suggestions, wearing cloth, how to level each magic school, a training example, and of course, spell making and enchanting, the reason I started this guide. I think it's safe to say I'm pretty spent. So if you have questions or your own recipes of things that you've enchanted or spells that you've made, please leave them in the comments below. And know that I have done other guides on the Elder Scrolls as well as Oblivion itself, including a quick recap on getting Black Soul Gems, the Daedric Artifacts, Doomstones, and if you haven't jumped into Skyrim Special Edition since the fishing was added, I did a guide on that too, as well as of course the Ultimate Leveling Guide. Special thanks to my pal Bad Company Sarge for adding his input and his suggestions when it comes to builds. You can find his channel linked here at the end card and down below. We're also both in a podcast called the Pipcast 3000, where we talk about RPGs and stuff. And thank you to my supporters, those on screen now, including Wasteland Legends, Sven, and Rose. If you head over to the Patreon, you can find monthly vlogs of me sharing a personal story, and of course support the things I do here, like fall off the map for a little bit and make a monstrous guide. Anyway, thank you so much. I'm Kato, and may you wander Cyrodiil like you own it.